Hey, what's up, everybody? This is part two of the video that I did for the Q Champions off of my cinematic hip hop album entitled Champions. As a quick review, I had three Qs from that particular album used for the WWE's greatest moments. But I'm focusing on Champions. In part one, I focused on drums, low brass, and bass. And in this video, part two, I'm going to focus on the strings, the horns, high brass, and synths. So that's what we're going to cover today. What I'm going to do, though, I'm going to put a link to part one in this video, and I'll also put it at the end of this video as well. So you want to definitely check out part one, so you'll have a complete understanding as to how to craft this type of cue. So you guys know how we do it. So as a refresher, we're going to take a listen to Champions, and then we'll get into breaking down those particular sections. All right, here we go. Hey, what's up, guys? So before we get into the breakdown, I hope that you can tell from my videos that I really have a heart and a passion for teaching. If you're in a place right now where you'd like to level up as a sync composer, I'd love to help you. I've had numerous placements on CBS Sports, TNT, True TV, Netflix, NBA TV, Discovery, Food Network, Eurosport, and placements in Japan, France, Denmark, Germany, and counting. I offer coaching and consultation, and you can schedule it right on my website. Just look for the link in the description on my channel. Go to the services tab and schedule an appointment. All right, let's get back to the video. All right, so there it is. Again, the cue is called Champions, and I want to, in this particular session, focus in on, again, the strings, the horns, the high brass, and the synths. Okay, so we're going to start with the strings. So as a general rule for me, one thing that I like to do with my strings is try to create a motif that's melodic enough to serve as the melody when there's no other melodic information. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the main melody, but it can serve or carry the cue melodically, even if you have like nothing else playing, if you have no other melodic information playing. So for my strings, so what I have this really kind of simple motif that's kind of happening in the strings. which is this. We'll just start right here. So that right. So that can serve as you hear. If I take out the other melodic instruments real quick. So if I take out my horn, I take out my high brass, etc. I can leave the Synths in. So if you listen now, I take those other things out. So check out the strings, how melodically they still carry what's going on. So that's basically what I'm talking about, how to utilize, first of all, to create a motif. Again, it's typically going to be a moving motif because it's an ostinato pretty much, which is an idea that, continues or whatever, just a repeated idea. But it's also something that's moving because our strings are kind of serving as our motor as well, that thing that kind of drives the cue forward. So those are a couple of things that we want to try to accomplish with our strings. So what I'm using for my strings, if you follow my channel for a while, you know that I do like cinematic studio strings. Pretty much what I'm using for my strings is the cinematic studio strings. And I typically do break my strings up by section, even if I have them playing, in octaves or whatever. Sometimes I'll have my strings playing in octaves. Sometimes I'll have them playing harmonically. It really just depends on the cue. But for this particular cue, I have them playing in octaves. So I'm just using the various sections of, in cinematic studio strings, and my articulation of choice for this particular cue and for most is staccatissimo. Staccato is a little too bouncy and a little too long, and sometimes spiccato is just a little too short and abrupt. So staccatissimo kind of sits right in between those and works pretty well for us there. So just very quickly, if you want to see kind of how I have stuff EQ'd, my first violins, I just have them high passed at about 268. And then also, if you see up here, my track delay or whatever, I have about minus 80 milliseconds for my strings, for cinematic studio strings anyway. If you have to do any type of delay compensation. That's something to look at. And then, that I think I got that MIDI. Yes, yeah. So that's MIDI. Everything else is MIDI in terms of how I have that laid out. So I'll pretty much create my channel, right? And then I'll just assign everything else to a MIDI channel. So violin 2 is on MIDI channel 2, viola is on MIDI channel 3, etc. Cello on MIDI channel 4, and etc. And that's kind of how I'll set things up, in my DAW there. Let me kind of go here. I'm sorry. We're trying to go here, right? So you can see just kind of how we have everything there. So again, we have everything in layers in terms of octaves in this particular cue, and everything's just kind of working together to play that particular theme. And then if we talk about the reverb that I have, I'm over here. So as you guys can see over here, what I do is I set up Synths for all of my effects. And then you see string verb, and I'm just using a Bahala Room. and kind of have it set as such. And I just created Jeff's hip hop strings or whatever, just in terms of what I use for my reverb there. And I always, on all my reverbs, you will see that I do kind of high pass them at 250 just to kind of get the mud out of the reverb. So something to think about as well when you're using reverb, so you don't have all that bottom end of the reverb kind of ganging up on you. All right, so cool. So that's it. And as I said, so the strings are pretty much going to be your motor and kind of that melodic idea that you can have even if you don't have any of the melody playing. So I have Cinematic Studio strings, and then I like to layer that with I like to layer that with the Spitfire Audio Originals Epic strings. I like to use the short ostinato there. And let's see. I just like, I like that sound, and when we kind of blend that. Oh, I'm sorry, with violin 2, I don't have violin 1 in yet. So you pay close attention, you can hear how it's just a different color. Just kind of gives you a different color. So I like that. Now, another trick that I like to use with my strings is oftentimes I like to blend in a synth layer with my strings as well. So this is my synth here. It's just, it kind of thickens up the strings just a little bit, gives them a little more, meat on the bone. So yeah, I like to do that oftentimes with my strings as well. So if you, again, the synth, and then if we just put all the strings that are playing in there together. And there you go, right? And then I try to pan that synth so it's kind of sitting in the same space with whatever it's doubling. So if it's a viola or, my second violins or whatever, then I just try to make sure that I pan it so it sits within the same space. So, and then for that, I am using Omnisphere, of course. And I'm using Anthem of Happiness. That's the synth that I'm using there. And if we look at what I have on it, you see just in terms of our EQ, we have it high pass at 346, and then we also have it low pass at 6,000. So again, just not, cutting out all the low end and stuff that we really don't need there. So that's pretty much it in terms of what you want to do with your strings. Again, motor, melodic idea that can carry the cue, even if there are no other melodic ideas happening. And then, of course, you see what sounds I'm using, how I blend them, etc. So you don't have to use Cinematic Studio strings. I mean, you can use whatever works for you. And again, in this particular cue, no harmonies at all in the strings. They're all just unison lines. And if we have them all in, I'll just show you who has kind of what unison layer. So violin 1. So really high there, violin 2, right? Viola, cellos. So all the different octaves, and then the epic string, okay, are doubling violin 2, and that's doubling the viola, like. So then that synth is doubling the violas, and so that's my layers for how we do our strings. Okay, so next let's talk about the horns. So horns What I like to use my horns for is typically for a strong counter melody in the early sections of my cue, and then I like them for that main melody support in the last A section of the cue because it really gives it a nice lift. I like using a blend of center brass horns. Let me kind of get all this stuff off mute here. So I like using a blend, again, of center brass. I like center brass on there. So what I talked about in terms of, first of all, counter melody. So we hear this counter melody here. So just a nice counter melody to kind of help finish off that phrase, if you will. So what we are doing with our horns, first of all, you see I have the delay compensation at about -100 for my horns. And then, as I said, I'm just using the horn ensemble in center brass, horn ensemble sustains. For two of my layers, and then I also it's sustain and short, so I use one as a short, and then I use in this case I'm using two sustains, and of course for the sustains you just use your sustain pedal, and for the shorts you just don't. So for my shorts, what I have is it's the same line. So it's just giving you, that accent, on the parts. So we come back. So just a little something to give us a little more definition on the line when we, add the shorts, right? In terms of EQ, I'm sorry, let's go here. I have all my horns high passed at about 155. I always dip out a little around 600 hertz. So I got about 3 dB dipped out there, and then I have a low pass of 6,000. I also use a dynamic EQ on all of my horns, because in this range here, right around that 600, 500, 400 to 600 hertz, let's say, you really kind of have to control those particular frequencies when your horns are playing. So let's see, because I don't know which one I pulled up, but let's see. So you see here, so we're really trying to control that frequency range, and then make sure no low end, junk is kind of really getting in. But we're trying to control this dynamic range in here. Really, I would say from 400 to 600 is we're just really trying to just tap down that frequency, so it doesn't really get out of control when all the horns are playing together. And then another thing that I do, once I get my volume blend where I want it on my horns, then I will create a VCA. And it's just a volume control that I like to create. And as you can see, can you see here? Let me get my face off of here. Okay, there we go. So here, as you can see, what I'll do is I'll take all three of these, and you can just right click. They're linked right now. So there would be a thing up here that would allow me to link these particular channels, right? And then so I link them, I create a VCA here called horns, and then I'm able to control my volume. So you see, if I move this fader, so I'm at -4.14, you see, so everything moves. So my balance never changes in terms of the balance that I've set for my horns. And I do it on other instruments as well, but that's a way that you can kind of control your balance for a group, without messing up the nice layer that you have. So very quickly, so you see, I like using it for counter support early, right? So early on, you hear that ba ba ba, right? And then you hear it again here. Right? Then we get into our breakdown. We have our breakdown section here. And now I'm using them for my main melody. And now you can hear really how I have those staccatos really helping me define what's happening in that line. So listen. Just helping define that entire horn line there. But you see how in the main or the last A section, because that's our biggest section of the cue, now the horns move to really supporting that melody as well. So that's very important there. And then again, if we get over to this section, back to our synths, right? You see I have a brass reverb section as well. And then I have, my brass kind of set up, kind of same difference. So I have a synth, and you see I got reverb for my drums, my brass, my strings, my synths, effects, and then I have parallel compression bus as well. So that is, how we utilize our horn. So again, to review counter melody, we get to the last section, boom, they go to the melody. And then you guys see how we layer them, how we EQ them, how we utilize dynamic EQ to kind of tame certain frequencies as well, right? Okay, so now let's talk about our high brass. So high brass, I like to use for, let's get back over here. So high brass, I like to use for counter melody and for strengthening my main melodic idea. Now, what I'm using for my high brass, for my trumpets, if you will, I'm using Hollywood Pop Brass, which is by East West. And then I like to layer different articulations. So I like to layer a staccato, a marcato, and then obviously you have to have longs to finish off the phrase. So I have a staccato, right, which is really short. I have a marcato, which is a little longer, but still gives you definition, right? And then, of course, the longs, because that ends your phrase. And then if I put those together, what we get is and then the other thing is when we talk about our other accents, it's like our falls and stuff. So that's really cool. So what we're doing here, what they're basically doing is they're giving you in this first A section a piece of the melody, just a piece letting you know, hey, we are here. We're not just going to pop up at the end of the cue out of nowhere. We do have a role even in the early part of the cue, but it's just kind of just giving you a piece of that melody. So if we play just this first section, so listen to how the horns, the strings are kind of carrying melodic idea, horns bring the counter, and then the trumpets introduce you to a piece of the main melody. All that happens in this first section. And then we, of course, enter our breakdown, right? So now when we get into our A section, the next time, let's kind of see what the trumpets are doing and what the horns are doing there. So now in this section, the horns, the melody is further developed by our trumpets, right? Now the melody is further developed, but the horns are still playing the counter melody, and they're getting us into our B section, right? So now we come out of our B section, you know, we got that ba ba da ba ba, right? And now, so we have the trumpets and the horns still doing the same job, but I think I might do something a little harmonic or something. I'm not really sure, to kind of change things up. So let's listen. So you heard that harmonic change right there, right? So we want to do something. I mean, it's kind of like the same thing, but it's got to be a little different. So here I do a little slight harmonic change. I think I went to the 2 or whatever, and I'm just kind of going off my ears here, but I think I went to the 2 right there. So just something a little different harmonically, right? In this section, then we go to another breakdown section, and now we got the horns doing this little lift that's going to kind of carry us into that last theme, right? So you see the horns carrying us into that last theme. And what I'm doing here is I save my trumpets now for the last theme, but the last theme has got to be different, right? So now when we get to the last theme, the horns and the trumpets work together. So let's get there. And then they give us a nice button. So you see the various uses, how you utilize those trumpets and those horns together to make sure that you have different things happening, you know, in every part of your cue, or, you know, your cue doesn't sound the same. And typically I do my horns, my trumpets, I just do my melody in octaves, so that melody really you know, kind of shines through, which is really, really cool. So melody and octaves. Sometimes I'll do harmonies, and you'll hear harmonies kind of on my hits. So if I play again the just the trumpets for you, you'll hear the melody, then you hear me do harmony on the hits. So we check this out. Hit, harmony. So yeah, so we're utilizing them in various different ways to kind of get our point across and make music. You know, at the end of the day, we want to make music, music that's still interesting, even though we have these parameters that we kind of have to work within, right? And again, like I said, I'm using the East West Hollywood Pop Brass. I'll kind of show you that just really quickly. Kind of how that's set up here. So what you basically do with East West, this pop brass, you got all these different things: sustains, shorts, effects, legatos, blah 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 blah. So, and then what you can do is you can set everything like I did when I was showing you my strings. You can set an articulation on a different MIDI channel, and then what that does is it also sends it to a different out as well. And then, you know, you can set up your different have your own volume controls and all that kind of stuff. And basically, like all you would do, say if I had, these are marcatos, right? So if I go here, you see the marcato will pop up here, down here, and then so for this MIDI channel 2, I can replace my marcatos or I can add a sound. So you could have 2 different articulations if you like. And that's pretty much the way it works in terms of setting up your sound. And then if I didn't show you my EQ, pretty much, everything is kind of high passed around 250. You kind of see my send for my reverb. And I think just on my longs, I do have, I got a little dynamic EQ happening just on my longs. And let me see if I can kind of just show you a little bit what's going on there. So that's it. Just help, again, taming those particular frequencies, with our long articulations, just so those frequencies aren't getting out of control. Okay, so the last thing, guys, that I want to show you in this whole thing is how I use my synths, right? So I use my synths for these particular reasons: harmony, vibe, and then, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes for layering with strings, right? So let's look how I use my I use my synths for harmony. So I have this synth happening here. So that's it. It's just really, it gives me a little motion, yeah, but it's really, this synth role is harmony. Everything I'm playing is harmonic, right? So very important. I like to, just have a little more harmonic support. And here I'm using Anthem of Happiness, but in a different way. So I'm using it, like I said, in a harmonic roll. I have it pan, totally different than the one that I'm using to help support my strings, right? So we have that going. And then the other thing, as I said, that I like to use for is vibe, right? Just to give you just a little kind of something that's happening kind of rhythmically and flavor wise, to give you just a little more vibe. So I have this going on with another synth. That's it. That's it, right? And at the end of this phrase, what does it do? And then it kind of layers with I think the trumpets on that last ba 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 ba. But this is just for vibe, nothing else. Just to give some rhythm and some vibe. And let's see here. And I'm using Anthem for that as well. So if we play these together, we have. So it just gives you something. So now listen to that now in the context of the whole cue. So we listen. Now I'm going to take them out and watch the difference. Listen to that. Small, but make a massive difference. Did you guys hear that? The difference with just muting those two synths, that the cue felt empty, right? It felt like it lost some motion. It lost some, that middle harmonic foundation. It's got the bottom right, but it lost those middle harmonics that it needed. So that's where I think that synths really shine, like today, in sports cues, like kind of fulfilling those particular roles. And then, again, as I said, doubling the strings, which I already showed you. So that's kind of how you utilize those particular sections to help finish out building your orchestral hip hop or cinematic hip hop cue. So let's listen now to I'm trying to find a section. Maybe we'll go to the last section of the cue, because I just want you to hear how now all just those particular pieces that we talked about today. So no low brass, no drums, none of that. Just these particular pieces, how they are working together, right, to kind of fulfill the role that they have within this cue. So this is just the last section, the last A section, with all these pieces working together. And there you have it. And then if we put those now with everything. So there it is, guys. So I hope that this kind of breakdown of these other parts of putting together an entire cinematic hip hop cue was helpful for you. I know it works because, like I said, it does get usage. These cues do get played. It happened to be wrestling this time, but it's NCAA basketball, it's NCAA football, it's the NFL, it's the NBA. These types of cues that have gotten a lot of usage in sports. I think even bull riding and bowling. So, hey, no matter the sport, we're with it. We're trying to make sure that we serve a need. So, like I said, use this information. Let's get better in crafting these cues. As I said, part 1 will be in the description, and it'll also be at the very end of this cue. So thanks so much for hanging out with me. I hope you did learn something. As always, peace and God bless.